Hello, welcome. Today I am going to tackle about pop art. What is pop art? Pop art is an art movement that emerged in the mid and late 1950s in Britain and America, respectively, and flourished in the 1960s. It was a revolt against the dominant approaches to art and culture, as well as on the traditional views on what art should be. Pop artists see abstract expressionism as too sophisticated and elite. Pop art paved the way for the exploration of bold and new art, drawing inspiration from popular sources like Hollywood stars, movies, advertising, product packaging, pop music, and comic books for the imagery. This is one of the alternatives to abstract expressionism, and attempted to show artwork that explicitly looked mechanical and manufactured, rather than painted with one's own hands. Pop art reflected everyday life and common objects. Artists wanted to bring art back into the daily lives of the people. Some of the pop artists' favorite images were objects from everyday's life, like soup cans for Andy Warhol or comics for Roy Lichtenstein. Richard Hamilton, an English artist, characterized pop art as popular, transient, expendable, low-cost, mass-produced, young, witty, sexy, gimmicky, glamorous, and big business, in a letter to his friends architect Peter and Alison Smithson. Did you know? The term pop was first published in 1958 by English critic Lawrence Alloway. Alloway then moved to the US and became one of the leading critics in the art world. The term pop art itself was not used by artists until the mid-1950s, though it became a common way to refer to this artistic movement after critic Lawrence Alloway wrote an essay describing it in 1958. Because of this, he is often credited with popularizing or even coining the term. The Independent Group. The Independent Group was a coalition of artists of various media, such as sculptors, painters, architects, and even writers and musicians to some extent, who emerged out of London's art scene in the early to mid-1950s. The intention behind this group was to challenge current artistic conventions and focus more on a found art style that treated cultural objects just as they were and didn't seek to stylize them through any particular lens. Richard Hamilton and Eduardo Palazzi, together with a new wave of artists like David Hockney and Peter Blake, were among the members of the Independent Group. These are some of the artworks of the members of the Independent Group. I Was a Rich Man's Plaything in 1947 by Eduardo Palazzi. Eduardo Palazzi produced large-scale figurative sculptures, prints, and collage made from magazines and other found objects. Just what is it makes today's home so different, so appealing in 1956 by Richard Hamilton. Richard Hamilton's visual juxtapositions from the 1950s were the first to capture the frenetic energy of television and remind us how strange the vacuum, tape recorder, and radio must have seemed for the first generations. And the leaves read, in 1967 by William Turnbull. William Turnbull was a Scottish artist known for painting and sculpture. He initially learned to draw by copying illustrations from magazines. And this is the artwork of Sir Peter Blake's Tattoo Lady in 1958. The British Pop. British pop art came about in London in the late 1950s with a group of painters, sculptors, and other artists who came together to form the independent group. Theirs focused on a more light-hearted tone and often tended to incorporate humor. The somewhat less commercialized culture of Britain at the time allowed their pop art to take on more of a tone of parody. British artists tended to focus on creating humorous pieces or on romanticizing their depictions of various objects of mass media, while American tended to create bolder and less light-hearted work due to their more direct exposure to the source material. The American Pop. The movement was a response to the commercialism as many aspects of the mass media and of general pop culture, such as magazine ads and comic books, were incorporated in the artwork. Pop style was a return to representational art that depicted the visual world in a recognizable way, and the use of hard edges and distinct forms after the painterly looseness of abstract expressionism. American pop art came about a few years after its British counterpart, emerging in the later 1950s through the work of artists like Jasper Johns and Robert Rosenberg. American pop art was a response to the culture at the time, which was marred in advertising and commercialism. Andy Warhol. The famously appropriated familiar images from consumer culture and mass media, among them celebrity and tabloid news photographs, comic strips, and in this work, the widely consumed canned soup made by the Campbell Soup Company. Andy Warhol was one of the major contributors to the American pop art movement, and one of the most famous and recognized artists from this period even to this day. Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup in 1962. Roy Lichtenstein. Roy Lichtenstein's technique often involved the use of stencils sought to bring the look and feel of commercial printing processes to his work, through the use of primary colors, thick outlines, and bandy dots. Lichtenstein endeavored to make his works appear machine-made. Wham! In 1963 is a large two-canvas painting by the American pop artist Roy Lichtenstein that takes its composition from a comic book strip. And that will be all. Thank you for watching.